The sick maid accidentally splashed the fiancé's designer dress. Then she faced a cruel punishment. Hey, stop scrolling for a second. Before you judge her, watch until the end. Because what happened to a quiet maid named Rosa Martinez, in a house full of marble floors and diamond chandeliers, is something you won't forget. It started with one small accident, a single splash of water, and it ended in a way that no one, not even Rosa, ever saw coming. Welcome back, friends. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from and which country do you call home? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Today's story is one of the most emotional, heartwarming, and honestly unforgettable stories I've ever told on this channel. It's about dignity, cruelty, and the kind of justice that arrives when you least expect it. Stay with me till the end because the final twist changes everything you think you know about this story. It all started like every other ordinary morning. Rosa Martinez woke up at 5 a.m., the way she had every day for the past 3 years. Her small apartment on the edge of Millbrook, Connecticut, was cold in the mornings, and her son Mateo, only 7 years old, was still curled up asleep under a thin blanket that used to be blue but had faded to gray from too many washes. Rosa kissed his forehead gently before she left. "I'll be back before dinner, Mijo," she whispered, even though he couldn't hear her. She worked as a housemaid for the Whitfield family, one of the wealthiest families in the county. Richard Whitfield owned 3 car dealerships and a chain of boutique hotels. His wife, Deborah, spent most of her time managing charity galas that never seemed to actually help anyone. And their daughter, Vanessa Whitfield, was getting married in exactly 11 days to the son of a state senator. The Whitfield mansion sat on 7 acres of manicured lawns, with a fountain out front shaped like a swan and a staircase inside that curved like something out of a movie. Rosa had worked there since she arrived in the country, first cleaning, then cooking, and eventually becoming the one person Deborah trusted to handle the family's most delicate tasks, including this week the care of Vanessa's wedding gown. That gown had cost $42,000. Imported lace from Italy. Hand-sewn pearls from a designer whose name Rosa couldn't even pronounce. It hung in a glass case in Vanessa's dressing room like a museum piece, untouched, waiting for the big day. Rosa had been sick for 4 days. A deep, rattling cough that kept her up at night. She hadn't told anyone at the house because sick days weren't really a thing for her. If she didn't show up, she didn't get paid, and if she didn't get paid, Mateo didn't eat. That morning, her fever was 101. Her hands trembled slightly as she carried a bucket of water down the hallway to mop the marble floor outside Vanessa's dressing room. She felt dizzy. The hallway blurred for just a second. And then it happened. Her foot caught the edge of the rug. The bucket tipped, and a wave of soapy water splashed across the floor, and onto the edge of the gown, which had been pulled slightly out of its case for a final fitting that morning. Rosa's heart stopped. She grabbed a towel immediately, pressing it against the fabric, whispering, "No, no, no," under her breath as if the dress could hear her and forgive her. But it was too late. A faint water stain had already begun to spread across the delicate Italian lace that could never, ever be replaced in time for the wedding. Rosa didn't hear the footsteps behind her. She didn't hear the sharp intake of breath. She only heard the voice. Cold, sharp, and filled with a fury Rosa had never heard directed at her before. "What did you do?" Rosa turned around slowly, towel still clutched in her shaking hands, and found herself staring into the eyes of Vanessa Whitfield. Eyes that, in that moment, held absolutely no mercy at all. What happened in the next 60 seconds would change Rosa's life forever. But not in the way anyone standing in that hallway could have imagined. Vanessa didn't scream right away. That almost made it worse. She walked toward the dress slowly, her heels clicking against the wet marble, and knelt down to examine the stain with the kind of horror usually reserved for tragedy. When she stood back up, her face had gone pale, then red. "Do you have any idea what this dress cost?" she said, her voice trembling with rage. "Do you have any idea what today even means?" "I'm sorry," Rosa said quietly, her fever making the room spin slightly. I felt dizzy. I don't care if you felt dizzy. Vanessa snapped. This is my wedding gown. This was one job. One job. Keep it safe until the fitting. Deborah Whitfield arrived moments later, drawn by the commotion, and her reaction was somehow colder than her daughter's. She didn't yell. She simply looked at Rosa the way someone looks at a stain on their own shoe, with disgust and a complete absence of curiosity about how it got there. Get the seamstress on the phone, Deborah said flatly to no one in particular. Then to Rosa, you will pay for this. Every cent. Rosa's stomach dropped. Ma'am, I don't have that kind of money. Please, I can fix it, I know. You will pay for it, Deborah repeated. Or you will work here for free until it's paid off. And until then, you will kneel right there and scrub every inch of this hallway until it shines, because clearly you can't be trusted to walk across it standing up. Rosa's ears rang. She thought she had misheard. But Vanessa, arms crossed, nodded in cruel agreement. Get on your knees, she said. Right now. In front of everyone. It wasn't just Deborah and Vanessa in the hallway anymore. Vanessa's bridesmaids had gathered near the staircase, phones in hand, whispering. One of them, a young woman in a champagne-colored dress named Chloe, actually laughed, a short, sharp sound that echoed off the marble. Rosa looked around the hallway at the faces staring down at her. Not one held sympathy. Not one asked if she was okay, if she was sick, if she needed water or a doctor or a moment to breathe. Slowly, because she had no other choice, because Matteo was waiting for her at home and rent was due in 6 days, Rosa knelt down onto the cold, wet marble floor. Deborah crouched slightly, grabbed a fistful of Rosa's damp hair, and forced her head down toward the bucket of dirty water still sitting nearby. Since you love water so much, she hissed, let's make sure you remember this. The bridesmaids gasped, some in shock, a few in twisted amusement. Chloe lifted her phone and began recording. Rosa closed her eyes, her body trembling from fever and humiliation both, water dripping from her hair onto the marble floor she had scrubbed 1,000 times before. And in that single moment, kneeling in a stranger's hallway while sick, exhausted, and utterly alone, she thought of only one thing. Matteo's face when she came home. She would survive this. She had survived worse. But what none of them knew, not Deborah, not Vanessa, not the bridesmaid recording on her phone, was that this exact moment, captured on video, was about to travel far beyond the walls of that mansion. And the consequences would be more severe than anyone standing in that hallway could possibly imagine. 3 days later, everything changed. Chloe, the bridesmaid who filmed the video, hadn't posted it out of malice. Not exactly. She'd shown it to a few friends first, laughing about crazy rich people problems, treating Rosa's humiliation like content, like entertainment. But one of those friends had a conscience. She downloaded the video, cropped out identifying details of the friend group, and posted it anonymously on a social platform with a simple caption. A wealthy family forced their sick maid to kneel and dunked her head in dirty water because she accidentally splashed a wedding dress. This is 2026 in America. By morning it had 400,000 views. By noon 4 million. News outlets picked it up by evening. Someone identified the mansion from the swan fountain visible in the background. Someone else identified Vanessa Whitfield from her own public wedding registry. Within 24 hours, the Whitfield name, a name that had opened doors, sponsored galas, and funded Senate campaigns, was trending for an entirely different reason. Richard Whitfield's dealerships began receiving angry calls. Sponsors of Deborah's charity gala pulled out one by one. The senator's family, whose son was set to marry Vanessa in 8 days, issued a quiet but devastating statement. We are re-evaluating our involvement with this wedding in light of recent events. Rosa knew none of this. She was home, still fevered, still nursing Matteo through his own cold that he'd caught from her, completely unaware that her face, turned away from the camera thankfully, but her voice and her trembling shoulders, unmistakably raw, was being watched by millions of strangers who were furious on her behalf. It was a knock on her apartment door that finally brought her the news. A local reporter, gentle-voiced, stood outside with a photographer trailing behind her. "Mrs. Martinez. My name is Angela Cho, I'm with the Hartford Courier. Do you have a few minutes? People want to know your story." Rosa nearly closed the door in fear. Fear of losing her job, fear of deportation threats Deborah had once casually mentioned, fear of anything that might hurt Mateo. But something in Angela's eyes was different from Deborah's. It was concern. Real concern. "I don't understand," Rosa said quietly. "What story?" Angela turned her phone around and pressed play. Rosa watched herself kneel. Watched the water splash down. Watched Deborah's hand grip her hair. And for the first time since it happened, she allowed herself to cry. Not from the memory, but from the strange, overwhelming realization that somewhere out there, strangers she had never met were furious on her behalf. That somewhere out there, people saw what happened to her and called it what it was. Cruelty. "They fired me the next day," Rosa whispered, wiping her eyes. "I never went back. Would you be willing to tell your story?" Angela asked gently. "The world wants to hear it. And Mrs. Martinez, there's something else you should know." Rosa looked up. "A lawyer reached out to our newsroom this morning," Angela said. "He's offering to represent you, free of charge. He says what happened to you may have violated labor laws, and possibly worse." For the first time in 3 years, Rosa Martinez felt something she had almost forgotten the shape of. Hope. The lawyer's name was David Okonkwo, a soft-spoken but sharp man who had built his career representing workers nobody else wanted to fight for. When he sat across from Rosa at her small kitchen table, Mateo peeking curiously from the hallway, David didn't talk about money first. He asked her how she was feeling. He asked about Mateo. He asked if she'd eaten that day. Then he asked her to tell him everything. Rosa told him about the 3 years of work. About the 14-hour days. About being asked to work through Christmas without extra pay because family is family, and you're basically family too. A phrase Deborah used whenever it benefited her and never once meant. She told him about the fever, the fall, the bucket, and the hallway. David listened without interrupting, jotting notes. His jaw tightening more with every detail. "This isn't just a viral video, Rosa," he said finally. "This is wage theft. This is a hostile work environment. And what they did to you on that floor, forcing you to kneel, putting your head in that water, that's assault. That's documented, on video, with witnesses." "I don't want trouble," Rosa said quietly. "I just want to move forward. I have Mateo." David nodded slowly. "I understand. But Rosa, you have a chance here to make sure this never happens to someone else. And you deserve compensation for what they took from you. Not just money. Dignity." Took Rosa 3 days to decide. 3 days of watching Mateo do his homework at their small kitchen table. 3 days of thinking about the years she'd spent quietly absorbing humiliation because she believed she had no other choice. On the 4th day, she called David and said one word. Yes. The lawsuit was filed the following week. For unpaid overtime spanning 3 years, for emotional distress, and for what the filing formally called degrading and abusive treatment of an employee. The video, now viewed over 20 million times, was cited as primary evidence. The Whitfield family's world, once untouchable, began to crumble in slow motion. Richard Whitfield issued a stiff public apology that fooled no one. Deborah refused to comment, hiding behind private security as reporters camped outside the mansion gates. And Vanessa, whose wedding had already been quietly postponed for personal reasons, found her own name trending for something no bride ever wants to be known for. But the twist no one expected, not Rosa, not David, not the millions watching online, was still coming. Because 3 weeks into the lawsuit, someone unexpected reached out to Rosa's lawyer. Someone from inside the Whitfield family itself. Her name was Emily Whitfield, Richard's younger sister. The estranged Aunt Vanessa hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade, ever since Emily had walked away from the family business, and the family's values, after a falling out no one liked to discuss. Emily requested a private meeting with David, and by extension with Rosa. They met in a quiet coffee shop outside of town, away from cameras. Emily arrived alone, dressed simply, nothing like the diamonds and silk Rosa remembered from the mansion. "I saw the video like everyone else," Emily said, her voice tight with something between shame and anger. "But Mrs. Martinez, I need you to know something. This isn't new behavior. My brother and his wife have treated staff this way for years. I left that family and that business because I couldn't stomach it anymore." She slid a folder across the table. "I kept records," Emily continued. "Emails. Old complaints from other employees that were quietly settled and buried with non-disclosure agreements. Financial records showing years of unpaid overtime, not just for you, but for at least 6 other workers who were too afraid to come forward." Rosa stared at the folder, her hands trembling slightly. "Why are you giving this to me?" she asked softly. Emily's eyes glistened. "Because someone should have done this a long time ago. And because I watched that video of you on your knees, and all I could think about was the housekeeper who raised me more than my own mother did. A woman my brother fired the moment she asked for a raise, after 15 years of service. Her name was Carmen. She died 2 years ago, still owed nearly $11,000 in wages my family never paid her." The coffee shop was silent for a long moment. "I can't bring justice for Carmen anymore," Emily said. "But I can help bring it for you." David's eyes lit up as he flipped through the documents. This wasn't just a strong case anymore. It was potentially a landmark one, capable of exposing a pattern of systemic labor abuse spanning over a decade. Rosa looked at Emily, this stranger who had walked away from wealth and family loyalty for the sake of doing what was right, and felt something shift inside her. Not hatred toward the Whitfields, though she had every right to feel it, but something closer to clarity. This had never really been about revenge. It was about being seen, about being treated like a human being instead of a tool that could be discarded the moment it became inconvenient. "Thank you," Rosa whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Thank you for seeing us." Little did any of them know, this new evidence was about to turn Rosa's personal lawsuit into a case that would be discussed in courtrooms, newsrooms, and living rooms across the entire country. The case exploded into national news within days. "Wealthy Connecticut family accused of decade-long labor abuse," one headline read. Morning talk shows debated it. Labor rights organizations reached out to Rosa, offering support, resources, and public platforms. A crowdfunding page, started by a stranger Rosa had never met, raised over $300,000 for her and Mateo within a week. Money she initially refused to touch out of sheer disbelief that strangers could be so kind. But with the support came something Rosa hadn't prepared for: backlash. Deborah Whitfield's lawyers fought hard, painting Rosa as an opportunist, exploiting a moment for financial gain. Vanessa gave a tearful interview claiming she had overreacted in a moment of wedding stress, and that Rosa had always been treated like family. Comment sections filled with cruel accusations questioning Rosa's immigration status, her motives, even her love for her own son. Some nights, Rosa sat awake long after Mateo had fallen asleep, staring at her phone, reading strangers call her a liar, a gold digger, someone trying to destroy a good family over one bad day. "Maybe I should drop it," she told David one evening, exhausted. "Maybe it's not worth all this." David leaned forward. "Rosa, listen to me. They want you to feel small again. That's the whole strategy. Make you doubt yourself until you disappear quietly, the way you were always expected to. But you're not the only one they hurt. Carmen isn't here to speak for herself. The 6 other workers who came forward this week, terrified but hopeful, are counting on you not to back down. That night, something in Rosa hardened. Not into bitterness, but into resolve. The next morning, she agreed to something she never imagined she'd do. A live television interview. She sat across from a national morning show host, hands folded tightly in her lap, Mateo waiting backstage with Emily Whitfield, who had quietly become something like a friend. "Mrs. Martinez," the host said gently, "tell us, in your own words, what happened that day." Rosa took a deep breath. And for the first time in front of millions of viewers instead of a hallway full of cruelty, she told her own story in her own voice on her own terms. "I was sick. I made a mistake. And for that mistake I was forced to kneel on a cold floor while a woman held my head over dirty water, in front of people who laughed instead of helping me up," Rosa said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "I am not sharing this for money or for fame. I am sharing this because for 3 years, I believed my dignity was worth less than a wedding dress. And I don't believe that anymore." The studio audience rose in applause. Social media erupted with support. And somewhere, watching from a hospital bed she'd been quietly admitted to after the stress of the case triggered a health scare, Deborah Whitfield watched the interview in silence, finally beginning to understand the weight of what she had done. 2 months into the lawsuit, something unexpected happened. Something none of them, not Rosa, not David, not even Emily, saw coming. Vanessa Whitfield asked to meet Rosa. Alone. David was against it at first, worried it was a trap, a manipulation tactic designed by expensive PR consultants to soften public opinion before a settlement. But Rosa, against everyone's advice, agreed. They met in a quiet park, far from cameras, far from mansions and marble floors. Vanessa arrived without makeup, without designer clothes, looking younger and smaller than Rosa remembered from that hallway. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Vanessa said, her voice shaking. "I've replayed that day in my head 1,000 times. I was stressed about the wedding, about my mother's expectations, about everything falling apart around me. And I took it out on you. There's no excuse for what I did." Rosa said nothing at first, letting the silence stretch. "My fiancé left me," Vanessa continued quietly. "The wedding's cancelled. My father's dealerships are being investigated. My mother had a health scare from the stress. Our name is destroyed. And honestly, think we deserve it. I think I deserve it. I didn't do this to destroy your family," Rosa said finally, her voice calm but firm. "I did this because I was tired of being invisible. Tired of being treated like I didn't matter, like my sickness, my son, my exhaustion meant nothing compared to a dress." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. "I know. And I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry." Rosa studied her for a long moment, this young woman who had once held her head over dirty water without a flicker of hesitation, now sitting across from her, broken and humbled. "Apologies don't undo what happened," Rosa said. "But I believe people can change if they're willing to actually look at themselves honestly. Are you willing to do that?" Vanessa nodded slowly. "I want to. I don't know how yet. But I want to." Before she left, Vanessa placed an envelope on the bench between them. "This isn't a payoff," she said quickly, seeing Rosa's expression change. "It's not from my parents' lawyers. It's from me. My personal savings. It's not much compared to what you deserve, but I wanted to give you something real, not something my mother's PR team calculated." Rosa didn't open the envelope until she got home. Inside was $8,000, and a handwritten letter, apologizing not just for the wedding dress incident, but for every small moment of casual cruelty Vanessa had shown staff over the years without a second thought. It wasn't justice. Justice, Rosa knew, would come from the courtroom, from the lawsuit, from real accountability. But it was something rare and unexpected, the first honest apology Rosa had ever received from someone who once had all the power in the room. The court settlement, when it finally came, sent shockwaves through the state. The Whitfield family agreed to pay Rosa and the 6 other former employees a combined $1.4 million in back wages and damages, the largest domestic labor settlement the state had seen in over a decade. Richard Whitfield stepped down from his dealership empire amid mounting public pressure. Deborah, still recovering from her health scare, quietly withdrew from all public philanthropic work. Her name removed from gala committees she had once dominated. But the money, while life-changing, wasn't the twist that mattered most. The real twist came 3 months later when Emily Whitfield, the aunt who had walked away from her family years before, approached Rosa with an idea. "I want to start something," Emily said. "A foundation. For domestic workers, caregivers, nannies. People like you, like Carmen, people who work impossible hours for families who see them as furniture instead of human beings. Legal aid, emergency funds, healthcare access. And I want you to help me build it." Rosa blinked, stunned. "Me? I don't know anything about running a foundation." "You know exactly what matters," Emily said. "You lived it. That's worth more than any business degree." It took Rosa weeks to say yes. Weeks of sitting with a strange, unfamiliar feeling of being asked what she wanted, rather than being told what she owed. But eventually she agreed. They named it the Carmen Foundation, after the housekeeper who had raised Emily and died still owed $11,000 she never received. Within its first year, it provided emergency legal support to over 200 domestic workers across the state, helped recover nearly $500,000 in unpaid wages for people too afraid to fight alone, and funded free healthcare clinics for caregivers who, like Rosa, had once gone to work sick because they had no other choice. Rosa, once a maid kneeling on a cold marble floor, became the foundation's director of outreach. Speaking at conferences, meeting with lawmakers, standing in rooms she never imagined she'd be allowed into, let alone lead. And through it all, Matteo watched his mother transform from someone who once whispered goodbye to him in the dark of early morning, exhausted and afraid, into someone who stood tall on stages, telling rooms full of strangers that dignity is not something you earn. It's something you're born with. And no one, not an employer, not wealth, not power, has the right to take it from you. A year passed. Rosa's life looked almost unrecognizable from the one she'd lived kneeling in that hallway. She and Matteo moved into a modest but comfortable home, no longer worried about rent due dates or unpaid medical bills. Matteo, now 8, proudly told his classmates that his mom helps people who don't have anyone else to help them, a description that made Rosa's chest swell with quiet pride every single time she heard it. She still thought about that day sometimes. Fever. The bucket. The cold marble beneath her knees. But the memory no longer held the same sharp, humiliating edge it once did. It had transformed slowly into something else, proof of how far she'd come, and a reminder of exactly why the work she now did mattered so deeply. Vanessa, true to her word, had changed too. Quietly, without cameras, without public statements designed to repair her image. She volunteered anonymously at the Carmen Foundation's clinic once a month, working alongside the very people her family had once dismissed as invisible. She and Rosa weren't close, not exactly. Some wounds don't fully heal into friendship, but there was a mutual respect between them now, forged from honesty instead of hierarchy. Deborah Whitfield never publicly apologized. Some people, Rosa had come to understand, never truly change, no matter how loudly the world demands it of them. And that was all right. Rosa no longer needed Deborah's apology to feel whole. Her healing had never actually depended on it. One afternoon, Rosa received a letter in the mail. Handwritten, no return address. Inside was a photograph of a woman she didn't recognize, smiling warmly in an old, faded picture, wearing a simple housekeeper's uniform. It was Carmen. The letter was from Carmen's daughter, who had seen the foundation's work in the news and wanted to say thank you, that her mother, wherever she was, would be proud that her name now stood for something powerful. Something that protected people the way no one had ever protected her. Rosa framed the photograph and placed it on her office desk at the foundation, right beside a small photo of Matteo. Two people who never met in life, forever connected by the same fight for dignity. On the 1-year anniversary of the video that changed everything, Rosa stood on a small stage at a community center in Millbrook, addressing a room full of domestic workers, caregivers, and their families. People who, just 1 year earlier, might never have imagined a room like this existing for them at all. "A year ago," Rosa began, her voice steady, her English carrying the same gentle accent it always had, "I was on my knees on a cold floor, sick, scared, and completely alone. I believed, in that moment, that my worth was decided by the people who employed me. That my exhaustion, my sickness, my humanity, none of it mattered as much as a piece of fabric." The room was silent, every eye fixed on her. "I was wrong," Rosa continued. "And it took strangers on the internet, a lawyer who believed me, a woman brave enough to walk away from her own family's wealth to do what was right, and even, surprisingly, a young woman who once caused me great pain, but found the courage to change, for me to finally understand something simple. Dignity was never something anyone could take from me. I only forgot for a while that it was mine to begin with." She looked out at the crowd, nannies, housekeepers, caregivers, and their children sitting quietly in the front rows. "If you are here today because you feel invisible, because you've been made to feel small, because someone has ever made you kneel, literally or in spirit, I want you to know this. You're not alone. And your dignity was never up for negotiation. Not then. Not now. Not ever." The applause that followed wasn't loud or dramatic. It was warm, steady, real, much like Rosa herself. After the speech, Matteo ran up to hug her, his small arms wrapping tightly around her waist. "You did so good, Mama," he whispered. Rosa knelt down, not out of fear this time, not out of humiliation, but out of love, and held her son close, right there in a room full of people who, for the first time in a long time, finally felt seen. The moral of this story is simple, but it's one worth remembering. Cruelty may have power for a moment, but dignity, once reclaimed, cannot be taken away again. No one's worth is decided by how much money they have, what job title they hold, or how they're treated in their darkest, most vulnerable moment. It's decided by the courage they show in rising back up. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine while writing it, please take a moment to hit that like button. It truly helps this channel grow. If you haven't already, subscribe, because we bring you powerful, real, emotional stories just like this one every single week. And if you know someone who needs a reminder that their dignity matters, someone who's ever felt invisible or unheard, please share this story with them. Thank you for watching until the very end. I'll see you in the next story.